The next winemaker is also a master of wine, an MW. It's Eran Pick. He discovered his passion for wine during his stay in Mayen in Germany, and while taking a day trip to the steep vineyards of the Mosel nearby, he discovered his passion for wine. By the way, I was born in Mayen, so there is no wine in Mayen, but nearby. Eran Pick completed his bachelor degree in viticulture and enology with the highest honor of the University of California in Davis. He is winemaker at Judean Hills Estate Winery, Thora Vineyards. And Eran, fair and green is part of your philosophy, isn't it?
Yes. First, thank you very much for inviting me here. I'm very honored being here. Yeah, Fair and Green is a company, a German company that helps us with the sustainability program that we want. Victor talked a lot about this sustainability, and we have the same philosophy. And I would like to show you some photos of the vineyard and area and talk about the Judean Hills. I love Israeli wine. I believe in them, and it's great that we have the option here to talk about them. So Judean Hills is an area that is in the middle of Israel. You will talk about today about three regions. One is the northern Israel, Golan Heights. Judean is in the middle of Israel, between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. And the next one is going to be in the south of Israel. Eran Goldwasser talked about it. We have today about 250 hectares of vineyards in the area, which is not a lot. It's much less than the Golan Heights, but I believe it's one of the most important regions in Israel. It's 25 years ago, there were almost zero planted with vines. I'm talking about the hills, the high elevation vineyards. Mid-90s, we began planting. We were one of the first ones, the winery. And today, almost 100% of the agriculture area is planted with vines. So it's from 0 to 100% in 20-something years. It's quite impressive. The topography is, again, in the center of Israel. You see in between the Mediterranean Sea on the left and the Syrian African Rift, which is in the Dead Sea, the lowest point on Earth. We have 0 meters elevation on the sea, and the Judean Hills, our vineyards are about 600, 700 meters above sea level, quite in the middle. Why is it important? Because we see that in order to get, Victor talked about it a bit also, but when we get higher on elevation, we get cooler summers, cooler nights, for, in my point of view, a better climate for vines. So this is a photo of the vineyards from above. This is about 1/3 of our vineyards. You can see the reason we have only 250 hectares in the region is that we're surrounded by natural reserves, not a lot of area to plant vines. But I don't know if you can see it on the hills, there are old terraces. People estimate that about 50% of the area was with terraces for agriculture, for hundreds or some of them probably thousands of years old. So agriculture was very important in the past, vines as well, and we know that because of the vine presses in the area. Today, some of the terraces that we see are natural reserves, so we can't plant any vines, but we try to plant wherever we can. There's a big demand for planting vines in the area. This is from another view. This is looking north. Neatly planted vines in between the natural reserves. So I won't talk a lot about sustainable viticulture in 8 minutes, but the point is to minimize our resources. In one hand, we have disadvantage compared to European wineries. So we have to irrigate. I'm sure that some European vineyards will have to irrigate as well in the next few years because of climate change. But We have to irrigate in most of our area because we have almost no soil, very shallow soil, and the rain is mostly during the winter, so we don't have any water reserves in the soil, very low water holding capacity. So we usually irrigate not a lot, but we irrigate a few times a year. So of course, irrigation is putting some resources. We have in the winery to put some energy to cool the cellars during the summer and also sometimes during the winter, not like in Europe. On the other hand, the disease, the health of the disease stress of the vines is very low. Compared to Europe, some of the classic places, we don't have to spray a lot. So it's quite, let's say, quite easy in the vineyard to be sustainable. Climate, this is showed, Victor has, Victor in the Golan Heights has snow, I think almost every year. In the northern part of the Golan Heights, we have every 3 or 4 years, but Mediterranean climate, as Victor said, quite nice, not too warm climate during the summer, and quite cool, not too cold winters. So I think if I have to summarize what is different between our area and the European, northern part of European area in regards to viticulture, I say that in my philosophy, we have to get away from radiation. As you know, the best, I start getting into wine once visiting the Mosel Valley. And what you see there, all the best vineyards are pointed towards the south. They're looking for the sun. And in Israel, we're trying to get away from the sun. So I believe that the best plots are north facing. And this is a photo of a plot, a Chardonnay, a white variety, that we, after veraison, during the last weeks of ripening, we put shade on the grapes in order for the to retain acidity, retain freshness, not to get into these tropical flavors that we sometimes see. And I think it's very important in our style of wine for the winery. Not all winemakers think so, but for our winery, it's very important. This is, I think, a couple of years ago. You see Chardonnay during the early stages. We're going to be at this stage in about 4 to 5 weeks. And the nets, we put them towards the bunches after veraison. This is a photo of Old Terrace. The vineyards are filled with old terraces. I don't know how old they are, but some estimate that the oldest could be 2,000 years old. This is a photo of the specific terroir. Unlike Golan Heights, which is more volcanic based soils, our soils are limestone based. They're a hint that they give us the clue that there was once an ocean there. So the Tethys Sea was in the area millions of years ago, and it left us this beautiful limestone, which some people think is very good subsoil for viticulture. We have a very, as you can see, very shallow soil of Terra Rossa soil, about 30 to 60 centimeters maximum, and subsoil of limestone, which is not too hard for the roots. This is, again, fossils that we find on top, actually, not inside, but on top of the soil. Quite amazing fossils, millions of years old because of the Tethys Sea. We harvest during the night, again, to retain the fruit fresh. This is, we put the people who come in to harvest put headlamps and get the coolest fruit they can. During the nights in August, where we have a much shorter harvest than Golan Heights. We harvest only 130 tons, much less than Golan Heights. It's about 3 to 4 weeks. And during August, so usually at night, it's about 18 to 20 degrees, depends on the vintage. We like to keep it that way and not harvest during the day and get 35 degrees or 32 degrees. This is Chardonnay harvested in 2016 vintage. As you can see during harvest, very clean, very green, which is the way I like it. You don't see any sunburns, and it helps the acidity and the freshness of the wines to retain the style of the winery. Varieties in our winery, I don't believe in monovarietals wines. We have all the wines are blended wines. I think it gives us much more possibility to produce complex and interesting wines and unique of the area. I think that if Sagi talked about the revolution of the Golan Heights winery in the early 80s to prove that a great wine could be made in Israel, I think our generation objective is to find the character of wine, the style of wine we want to make in Israel. And it takes, of course, a long time and trial with different varieties. Most of the red wines, I mean, all of the red wines are blends of Syrah and Bordeaux varieties. Syrah and Bordeaux varieties, which is, I think, very nice for our climate and soil. This is the winemaking is not very unique. Maybe today barrel aging is quite unique compared to amphoras, but we're quite traditional, so we do it the traditional way. These are the 5 wines we produce, 2 whites, 3 reds. As I said, all of them are blends, and hopefully some of you can taste them wherever you are.
Fascinating. You talked about about an Israelian style of wine. If you would have to describe a typical Israelian wine style, how would you describe it then?
Well, this is a question I cannot answer in a few words, but of course, I think to answer it in a serious way, I think it's in process, because today we have about 40 years of making good wine in Israel, and about, let's say, 50 to 100 commercial wineries from very different terroir, very different varieties. And I think each winery still has their own goals of the style. But I do see that in each region there is we getting together to have a regional character of the wines. We see that in tasting, and maybe other winemakers can comment on that, but I think the Golan Heights and Galilee are a lot of many times very fruit driven and very high concentration. And the Judean Hills, sometimes it's more on the mineral side and elegance, in my mind. And Eran can talk more about the south of Israel.
Okay. Thank you very much, Eran.